Hello and welcome to Spill the Tea. True Stories, the place where real life is more fascinating than fiction. Sit back, pour yourself a cup of tea, and let's dive into the moments that stay with us forever. We're starting now. A dusty, narrow street led Nicholas into a small provincial town with the unusual name of Northwood. A business trip had brought him here after a long journey, a plane to the regional center, then tedious hours on the commuter train. But Nicholas didn't feel tired. From childhood, he had a passion for travel, and even business trips felt like exciting adventures. Usually, his visits were to large cities, as the company where he served as chief economist owned a thriving chain of household appliance stores. Branches multiplied across the country, and Northwood became another point on the map of their expansion. Nicholas had come to settle the final formalities related to opening the new store. Everything went smoothly. Papers signed, issues resolved. Tomorrow morning, the commuter train would take him back to the regional center, and from there, a plane would deliver him home to his native Ashton. The company's head office was located there, which was a convenient and profitable arrangement. The evening promised to be free, and Nicholas decided to stroll through the town to breathe in its atmosphere. Northwood seemed quiet and peaceful, a place where life flowed measuredly and predictably. Surely everyone knew each other here, and good neighborliness hadn't yet become a relic of the past. He pictured cozy courtyards where old people sat on benches, children played in sandboxes, and women chatted by the entrances. These images stirred warm memories of his own childhood. Every summer, even if only for a couple of weeks, his mother would send him to his paternal grandparents, and he looked forward to those days with impatience. His parents divorced when he was very small, but his mother often recalled her resentment towards his father, who, according to her, had left them for a new woman and moved to Eastport. "He doesn't need his son or his parents," she would exclaim, not sparing harsh words. Nicholas found it unpleasant to hear this, especially since his father truly showed no interest in him, never even wishing him a happy birthday. His grandparents lived in a large village not far from Ashton, and every summer they waited for their grandson. His mother was wary of them, fearing they would turn Nick against her. Therefore, the visits were short, but incredibly happy. For those 2 weeks, they surrounded him with boundless love and care. Delicious food, fishing with his grandfather, sleeping in a tent, swimming in the river with the local kids. Nicholas was steeped in happiness. He dreamed of spending the entire summer with them and knew his grandparents would be more than happy. They never spoke ill of his mother. On the contrary, they taught him to help her, as it was hard for her alone. His mother, however, often spoke dismissively of her in-laws. They couldn't even raise their own child, they never left the village, they speak ungrammatically. Sometimes his grandparents would tell funny stories about his father's childhood, similar to Danny's stories. Nicholas would laugh at his antics, but couldn't understand how such a cheerful and brave person could abandon his own son. Could it be that he didn't think of him at all? Later, Nicholas learned that his father had tried to maintain contact, called, and sent postcards, but his mother, out of resentment, gave him no chance. She told him this herself when Nicholas was already grown and learned of his father's death from a heart attack. A feeling of irreplaceable loss weighed him down, as he never had the chance to talk to him, to figure everything out. That day, his mother spoke well of Nicholas's father for the first time. She recalled how he helped with little Nick, got up at night, and ran to the milk kitchen. But then she immediately returned to her resentment, explaining why she hadn't allowed them to communicate. "He's in Eastport. We're here. It's better not to know such a father at all than to break your heart." Nicholas forgave and understood his mother. He always felt sorry for her. She raised him alone, devoted herself entirely to him, and didn't remarry. Thanks to her efforts, he became a successful and well-off person. From an early age, his mother instilled in her son the importance of education. She herself worked as a seamstress her whole life. Nicholas loved watching how a beautiful item was born from a simple piece of fabric under her hands. Her work brought in good money, and in his childhood, he lacked nothing. "Study hard, son. You'll become a great man. Then we'll live well," his mother instructed. Nicholas thought they lived well enough already, but he listened to her words. Studying came easily to him, and he was almost an straight-A student. Student life completely engrossed him. Parties, trips, preparing for exams. Nicholas felt happy, being in his element. His mother, however, worried, warning him against rash actions and the dangers of the big city. She feared he would get caught up in revelry, fail his exams, or fall into the clutches of greedy girls. Nicholas was amused by these fears. He felt grown up and capable of controlling his own life. He tried to reassure his mother, but she still saw him as a little boy who needed protection. Remembering his student years, Nicholas smiled. His mother was still the same, always trying to arrange his life. Her new obsession was his bachelorhood, as he was already approaching 40. She persistently tried to set him up with friends' daughters, good girls from decent families. It was both funny and awkward. Nicholas wasn't angry, understanding that his mother wanted the best for him, as she understood it. He was quite content being a bachelor, free and accountable to no one. Of course, he had brief romances, but attempts to tie him down were sharply rebuffed. He didn't need a family. He was afraid of becoming a bad husband or father, seeing how many unhappy couples and divorces there were. Many years ago, he was sure he had met the love of his life, and the world had transformed. But then came disappointment and pain, from which he barely recovered thanks to his mother and a good psychotherapist. Nicholas didn't want a repeat, so he consciously chose a life dedicated to work. Why did these thoughts flood him now, in Northwood? Perhaps the town reminded him of his grandparents, who were long gone. His mother had been indignant then that his father hadn't even come to the funeral, leaving everything to his brother. Later, Nicholas learned about his father's financial problems and the impossibility of traveling quickly from Eastport. But at the time, his mother painted her son a terrible picture of his parent, not holding back in her expressions. With years, he understood more clearly how his mother, loving and having done everything for him, pressured him, shaped his opinion, molded him to her will. Because of this, in childhood and youth, he often felt confused. But there was no resentment, only gratitude and pity for her. She laid her life on the altar of his future, worked hard, solved problems. As an adult, Nicholas called her every day, visited often, and gave gifts. He understood how important his attention and conscious gratitude were to her. His legs carried him instinctively to the train station square, which wasn't surprising for a small town. He craved home-cooked food, and there he saw a sign that read, "Cafeteria." Heading towards the cafeteria, he passed a fountain where a trembling, cracked voice stopped him. "Young man, it's awkward to ask, but there's no other way. Please help." Nicholas turned around and saw a hunched old woman in an old dress, with a colorful headscarf and dusty sneakers. But her blue eyes looked timid and guilty, clearly not belonging to such an old woman. She was a beggar, the same age as his mother, whom a hard life had apparently aged prematurely. "Of course," Nicholas nodded, rummaging through his pockets. He found cash, several thousand ruble bills. Without hesitation he handed them over, seeing desperate need and hope in her eyes. She didn't seem like the brazen professional beggars. "This all for me?" the stranger asked, surprised at the money. "Yes," Nicholas confirmed. "Oh, thank you, dear. God bless you. I'm not asking for myself, you understand?" Nicholas wanted to move on, but he felt it was important for the old woman to explain herself. He stayed, allowing her to speak. "I have a grandson, Stevie. His mother, my daughter, died. I'm raising him as best I can, but there's not enough money. I can't work. I've become old and sick. I have to ask good people for help at the station. Don't think it's for drink. I'm not lazy, I've worked my whole life. If it weren't for illness, I'd be working. For Stevie's sake, I walk with an outstretched hand. He's growing, he needs to be fed, clothed, educated. You have a difficult fate, Nicholas said, shaking his head. You're doing great not abandoning the boy. How old is he? The old woman smiled, clearly happy to talk about her grandson. He's 12, handsome and smart, learns easily, clear head. But he suffers because of our hardship. He sees how hard it is for me, tries to earn money, washes cars, mows lawns. He gets pennies, or sometimes nothing. People cheat the boys. He spends a lot of time, comes home tired, no time for lessons. His studies are slipping. I tell him, "Study, Stephen, that's the main thing, I'll manage." But he doesn't listen to me, she sighed. He doesn't listen, Nicholas repeated, latching onto the story. He wanted to know more. Is it hard for you with him? No, of course not, the beggar exclaimed, throwing up her hands. You misunderstood. Stevie is very good. He takes care of me, helps around the house. He just doesn't listen about working. It's hard for him. My heart breaks for him. I wish Stevie could be in a good family. He's talented. He'd make something of himself. But I'm afraid he'll ruin his abilities with me. That's what I worry about. With these words, the old woman adjusted her scarf. Her sleeve pulled up, revealing a thin gold chain with 3 hearts. Nicholas stared, startled at the bracelet. No, not at the expensive jewelry, but at the bracelet itself. Many years ago, he had ordered the exact same one at a jewelry workshop for the girl he considered his soulmate. Their names were engraved on 2 of the hearts, Nicholas and Vera, and the third was adorned with a diamond. He had spent all his savings on it. What was this? A random coincidence? Or that very bracelet? It wasn't difficult to find out, but it felt strange, even scary. The old woman caught his gaze and smiled. I know what you're thinking. She pretends to be a beggar, but she's wearing gold. You're mistaken. This is a memory, my daughter's memory. In the hardest times, I couldn't part with it. Vera loved this bracelet so much it meant a lot to her. That's why I haven't taken it off since that terrible day, since Vera... Nicholas felt as if he had been doused with ice water. His heart clenched, pounded, and his temples throbbed. Vera, the girl for whom he had ordered the bracelet, was named Vera. Do you have time? Nicholas clarified. Yes, the old woman replied, looking at him suspiciously. We need to talk, Nicholas said. I think I knew your daughter. This bracelet, and the name, everything fits. Maybe we can sit down? All right, the old woman nodded and headed towards a bench by the fountain. Nicholas trailed behind her. He had met Vera during the summer work duty before his final year. She worked in a repair crew cleaning the university after renovations. Fragile, large-eyed, cheerful, and bright. He noticed her immediately. Nicholas constantly caught her eye, and when he succeeded, Vera would blush, and he would feel happy. His heart would sweetly flutter near her. Surprisingly, no one else, not even the local Don Juan Gary, noticed her unique beauty. Seeing Vera dragging a heavy bucket, Nicholas dropped everything and took it from her. Give it here! On the way to the second floor, they started talking. Vera turned out to be simple, modest, and easy and pleasant to talk to. The work duty lasted a couple of hours, but Nicholas stayed to help Vera until the end of her shift, not wanting to part. After work, they went to the cinema. Holding her hand, Nicholas felt his life taking a serious turn. They started dating, gradually becoming close. Both grew up without fathers. Both had only mothers. But while Nicholas's mother strived to give her son an education and a prosperous life, Vera's mother, a cleaner, barely made ends meet. Vera helped her from a young age. After 9th grade, she went to a construction technical school. She didn't even dream of higher education. I need to work. I need money. After finishing technical school, she got a job in a repair crew. With 2 salaries, things became a little easier, but the money was only enough for necessities, as they had to rent an apartment. Nicholas was sure they would get married. He saw no other destiny. Vera was completely his person, fragile, kind, sensitive. He wanted to protect her, so she wouldn't have to carry heavy things. He would have a good job. He could provide for a family. Vera could take care of the house, study whatever she wanted. Of course, he told his mother everything. Hearing about Vera, she was horrified. "Are you out of your mind? How many times have I told you? You're a boy from a well-off family with prospects. And girls like that, poor things, hunt for guys like you." "No, Mom. Vera is completely different. You'll understand when you meet her," Nicholas insisted. "You don't understand much. There will be wagons full of girls like Vera. You need someone else from a good family with an education. And these girls from out of town, they'll have a baby and then twist you around their finger." No matter how Nicholas tried to explain, his mother wouldn't listen. In the end, he decided, the wedding would have to be postponed. His mother wouldn't accept Vera in their apartment. The only way out was to get on his feet as quickly as possible, earn enough for a separate home, and then propose. He couldn't imagine life without Vera anymore. He felt strong and vulnerable at the same time when he was with her. His heart belonged to her, and she treated it gently. When Vera rested her head on his shoulder, he was the happiest man in the world. The offer for an internship abroad came unexpectedly. Nicholas was finishing his diploma. Graduation was near. He planned to start saving for a home right away, even a small one, but their own, where he and Vera would start a happy family life. The rector summoned him and told him about a profitable contract with a foreign partner. 3 years abroad, a lot of work, but a salary that couldn't be found in the city. Nicholas calculated, this money would be enough for a decent apartment. Experience abroad would increase his value as a specialist. He would easily find a high-paying job. Of course, he agreed. He would have to part with Vera for 3 long years, with almost no chance to see or talk, only correspondence. A terrible period. But it was the only chance to get on his feet quickly. He had to endure, survive the separation. A real test of feelings. Nicholas was sure they would manage. Vera was upset when she learned about his plans, even cried, but she understood it was the only way out. Before leaving, Nicholas wanted to give her a special gift, something memorable. He went to a jewelry workshop and ordered an exclusive bracelet. Elegant, like Vera, with heart pendants. Their names were engraved on 2, and the third was adorned with a diamond. The master named the sum, all of Nicholas's savings. But he parted with them without regret. The bracelet was ready in a week, and Nicholas admired it. It was exactly what he wanted, jewelry with meaning. Vera's eyes lit up with joy at the sight of the gift, but she immediately blushed. "This is incredibly expensive." "You deserve the best of everything," Nicholas smiled. "All this will be yours when I return. Let the bracelet remind you of me." "I won't take it off at all," Vera promised and hugged him. His mother, unlike Vera, was delighted with the internship. "See how smart you are. They value you. And the trip will be good for you. You'll get that poor little bride out of your head, and your head will be straight." Nicholas didn't argue. He knew he wouldn't forget Vera, and the whole internship was for her sake. Without the trip, they wouldn't get their own home so quickly. Soon he would be independent, ready for a family. He worked his fingers to the bone, poring over reports, overcoming the language barrier. It was hard, but he had a goal, and he was working towards it. He often called his mother. She was happy to hear from him, showered him with compliments and questions. But with Vera, he had to correspond. She didn't have a home phone. He missed her voice so much. The correspondence stopped after a couple of months. Nicholas's letters stopped arriving, and there was no news from Vera. "Mom, do you know what happened? Why isn't Vera answering?" he wondered. "How would I know? Maybe your flighty girl ran off?" his mother replied reluctantly. You're not telling me something. I'll fly back tomorrow, Nicholas feared. Don't you dare! She's fine, she's waiting for you. It's just problems with international mail. Letters aren't getting through. Just work calmly, his mother insisted. It was hard to live without contact with his beloved. His mother spoke reluctantly about Vera, changing the subject. When her son insisted, she would report, everything was fine. She was alive and well, working. Nicholas asked her to arrange a call, but his mother was adamant. There will be no Veras in my house. Nicholas was angry, but understood it was her apartment, and she had the right not to let in someone she couldn't stand. He had no doubt, when he returned and married Vera, his mother would meet her and see what a wonderful person she was. She would definitely change her mind. 3 years flew by quickly, filled with work and interesting tasks. Nicholas saved enough for a good apartment and a car. On the other hand, 3 years without his beloved felt like an eternity. He missed her. She appeared in his dreams, and he saw her in girls he met. During this time, he didn't look at anyone else, although there were options. His mother hoped her son would find a decent girl in his new place, but he disappointed her every time. Vera. That was his destiny. The internship was coming to an end. Nicholas chose gifts for Vera, imagining her joy. His mother met him at the airport, greatly changed over 3 years. They hugged tightly. His mother looked at him with pride. You've grown up, become a real man. Nicholas felt the same way. His youth was behind him. They didn't mention Vera. He hurried home to see her as soon as possible. She was probably at work, but he would ask her mother where to find her. Nicholas couldn't wait. He had dreamed of this meeting for 3 years. He needed to see her, hear her voice, look into her eyes. Going to her, are you? His mother asked when he was at the door. To her, Nicholas didn't deny. Well, good luck, his mother curled her lips contemptuously. Nicholas had never been to Vera's home, but he knew the address. Factory Street, a former barracks. The troubled neighborhood had become even more dilapidated over 3 years. He climbed the creaking stairs. There was the right door. The doorbell didn't work, so he knocked. The door opened after a couple of minutes. An elderly man in a greasy bathrobe stood on the threshold, with a sharp gaze. Who was this? Vera lived with her mother. Good afternoon, Nicholas greeted. I'd like to speak with one of the residents. You're looking at him, the man smiled. What about? I won't invite you in. The grandchildren are sleeping. You see, I'm looking for my girlfriend, Vera. Perhaps I'm mistaken, but she lives somewhere nearby. Your neighbors, Vera. The man shook his head. Vera and Val, her mother, they lived here. They left in a hurry. This is my apartment. They were renting. I don't know why it was so sudden, as if they were fleeing. It worked out for me. My son had twins, so we moved here. The apartment is more spacious. They left. And you don't know where or why? No, they didn't report. I didn't ask. They packed up in an evening, paid, and that was it. From their conversation, I understood they were going to another city. Which one? I don't know. Nicholas understood then that he had lost Vera forever, but he didn't give up immediately. He started an investigation, went to her former workplace, and talked to her friends. They knew nothing. Vera became strange, even before she left, Claire, Vera's colleague, shared. At first, she was sad when you flew away. Then she became happy, radiant. We thought she fell in love again. She denied it. Then something happened again. Pale, frightened. I tried to find out but couldn't get anything out of her. And then she suddenly left. Nothing makes sense. Having found out nothing, Nicholas went to the police. They laughed at him. Vera and her mother were adults. They could go anywhere. Maybe she ran away from you? Doesn't want to communicate, and you don't understand words. It happens. "You're not a relative of mine. I won't accept a statement." After some time, Nicholas lost hope. He realized he wouldn't find Vera. They had no place of their own. They could have gone to any city in the vast country. Looking for them was like looking for a needle in a haystack. But why? Why did Vera do this? Did she stop loving him? Did she run away? What did it matter now? They would never see each other again. Then the young man fell into despair. While he was searching, hoping, it seemed everything could be fixed. Now he knew. Vera had disappeared forever. Plans for a wedding, children, were not meant to be. Why the internship? Why did he save? Why did he leave? He didn't want to live. There was no meaning. Vera was gone and wouldn't return. He lay in his room, listening to sad music, thinking. Maybe Claire was right. Did she meet someone else? Or couldn't she wait? In any case, she easily erased him, didn't even leave a note. She could have sent it through Claire or her mother. Did that mean he meant nothing to her? Vera was his world, the meaning of his life, and he was just an acquaintance to her. He didn't want to live. He barely ate, didn't answer calls, didn't talk to his worried mother. "Why are you suffering?" "Well, she didn't wait. It happens. She has her own life, you have yours, and you're making a tragedy out of it." His mother wanted to ease his pain, but her words only made it worse. She didn't understand what was happening in his heart. Pain, despair, hopelessness. He couldn't imagine living with this burden. In the end, his mother found him a psychotherapist. After 2 days of starvation, she was afraid he would die. A short, elderly man in simple clothes arrived. His mother had called him to the house, knowing her son wouldn't go to a clinic. Nicholas didn't know how much effort and money it cost. This man simply sat nearby, saying something in a low voice. At first, Nicholas didn't listen. Then he became interested. The psychotherapist miraculously helped. A professional. After several sessions, Nicholas felt like a different person. Life goes on even without Vera. There's much that's interesting in the world. It's selfish and foolish to wallow in sorrow. Vera's disappearance was her choice and her right. No person is another's property. If she wanted to, she left. If she wanted to, she would have shown up. It couldn't be said that he became happy. The longing for Vera was strong, but he found strength. It was time to act. Look for a job. Settle down. The psychotherapist advised him to continue therapy, but Nicholas refused. He felt he could manage on his own. Getting a job was easy. With his experience, he was hired as a senior economist. The salary was decent, and they promised career growth. Nicholas planned to prove himself to distract from sad thoughts. If he stopped, the longing would consume him. He worked hard, quickly achieving success. Life turned from black and white to color. At first, dull gray, then bright, vibrant. With money, the world becomes attractive. He could afford a lot: travel, expensive resorts, cars. And girls, of course. A young, handsome, wealthy man had no shortage of choices. His mother was initially happy. She had been worried about his life. But over time, his too-free lifestyle began to bother her. "You need to get married, son." He heard this phrase more and more often, but he didn't agree. He was fine this way. Free and almost happy. Serious relationships were a past stage. He didn't want a repeat. If you love, you become vulnerable. He remembered the pain of Vera's disappearance. No, enough. Love, serious relationships, the end of freedom. A person in love doesn't belong to themselves. That's why he didn't think about marriage. There was plenty of time. He wasn't 40 yet. His mother scared him with lonely old age, a glass of water. He joked that he wasn't sure he'd want to drink at such a moment. It was foolish to give up a happy bachelor life for a vague prospect, especially since there was plenty of female company. He tried not to remember Vera, but she would surface. in dreams, in girls he met. He learned to cope with his emotions. He hadn't completely erased her from his heart, but Vera no longer interfered with his life. He thought he had left her in the past. All these memories flashed through his mind as he walked with the old woman to the bench. He saw the bracelet, and all his feigned nonchalance vanished. He felt the longing for Vera again, realizing he would give up all his wealth and freedom just to have her by his side. But the old woman said Vera was no longer alive. He was afraid to think about it, hoping for a mistake. "So you say you knew my Vera?" The old woman watched him closely. "Yes," Nicholas nodded. "This bracelet. I recognized it. Can I see it?" The old woman silently took off the jewelry and handed it to him. Nicholas held his breath. It was it, the very one. There was no doubt. An elegant, original piece. He looked closely at the hearts. Yes, it was true. Names. A diamond. "I am that Nicholas," he said, handing the bracelet back. "I gave it to your daughter." "So this is you," the old woman said, shaking her head. "Vera was so in love back then. She was flying on wings. I told her, don't get involved with people like that." "Like what?" Nicholas didn't understand. "Sons of rich parents. We weren't rich. My mother raised me alone, just like you raised Vera. But still, you weren't our equal. You studied at university. Your mother earned well. She thought anyone poorer wasn't a match for her son. Maybe she was right. There's just one problem. She went against your love." "I don't understand anything." Nicholas wanted the old woman's face to soften. She was clearly offended. Why? He had left for their happiness, worked hard for 3 years, earned money, wanted to propose, but couldn't find her. "You don't understand?" The old woman's eyes pierced him through. "Maybe you forgot? Or didn't know anything?" Nicholas shrugged. "I looked for her," he said. "When I came back, I looked everywhere. I went to your home. Others lived there. I tried to find out at work. I wanted to file a missing person report, but they refused. No one could tell me where Vera disappeared to." "Did you talk to your mother?" the old woman clarified. "Yes, she didn't know either." Nicholas understood from her words that his mother was involved. Anxiety rose in his heart. It felt ready to leap out. Was he about to learn the truth he had sought for so long? The old woman fiddled with the bracelet, looking into the distance, transported to the past. Nicholas wanted to snap her out of her trance, to learn the truth sooner. All these years he had lived, thinking he had left the past behind. He had fun, he worked. A chance meeting changed everything. He felt lost, vulnerable again, physically pained by the inability to take Vera's hand. It was important to hear what had happened after he left. But the old woman sat, her lips stubbornly pressed together, and Nicholas didn't dare disturb her. She had been through something terrible. She needed time. "Vera, she loved you very much. You were the most important person to her," the old woman finally began. "I noticed right away that something was different with her. She often stayed late, came home happy. I immediately understood. There was a boy. I didn't pry. I just asked her to be careful. I thought it was someone from the crew. But look how it turned out." Valerie raised her daughter alone, escaping the village, but life in the city wasn't what she had dreamed of. She couldn't get into technical school. She had no connections or money. She wasn't upset. She stayed in the city, rented a room, and got a job as a cleaner. The next year, another attempt, another failure. She decided it wasn't meant to be. She had work, she had housing, she would get by. Years passed, and Val transformed from an awkward teenager into a pretty woman. Men started noticing her. She began to think about family. She wanted to take care of a husband and children. A candidate came along, Lenny Miller, a loader. Handsome, cheerful, never discouraged. Not an oligarch, but Val wasn't a princess either. With him, you wouldn't be lost or bored. He was also from the village. They had a lot in common. Practical, reliable. Lenny quickly proposed. They had a modest wedding, without extravagance. Val had a white dress, just a simple light sundress. They sat in a restaurant with friends and the bride's parents. Lenny was an orphan, raised by his aunt. He hadn't seen much love. Valerie dreamed of a happy life. It was easier to make it together. They rented a separate one-room apartment. Leonard made plans for their own home. Val looked at him with hope. If Lenny said it, it would happen. But the plans were not meant to be. Leonard tried to earn money wherever he could, doing odd jobs on construction sites, unloading wagons. He was sleep-deprived and underfed. Val begged him to give up the extra work, but he smiled. "We'll earn enough for an apartment, then I'll rest." Val felt sorry for her husband, saw how tired he was, how he had lost weight, his face was gray. Her heart sensed it wouldn't end well. And so it happened. Trouble came at night. Her husband went out for an odd job, didn't return in the morning. Val went to the station. There they told her. Leonard had finished the work, got paid. He walked along the tracks, didn't hear the train. The driver noticed too late. "It's strange, why was he sitting there?" a worker wondered. But Valerie understood. He was tired, exhausted. He fell asleep on the tracks. So Valerie became a young widow. She took the loss hard. Along with him, her hopes for a family, an apartment, old age, vanished. And in this difficult period, she realized she was expecting a child. The news made her happy and upset her. Happy, Leonard would live on in the child. Upset, how would she manage alone? Her salary barely covered her, and Leonard wouldn't know how happy he would have been. After crying, Valerie pulled herself together. She would manage. She wasn't entirely alone. Her parents in the village would help. But her husband's death wasn't the only blow. Her parents, a short circuit in their old house, they both burned to death. Valerie couldn't believe this was happening to her. Husband, parents, alone in an uncomfortable, hostile world. She didn't want to drink or eat. She went to work automatically. She ate, she talked. But it seemed everything around her was a terrible dream. Cardboard scenery. She saw herself from the outside. There were no tears, only a heaviness. Sometimes panic, difficulty breathing, colored spots. Then apathy. She lived like this for 2 months. Loneliness and feeling unwanted became habitual. Before, she was loved. She loved her dear ones. Now, why live? Troubling thoughts began to weigh on her. Everything felt meaningless. She found herself wondering, what was the point of going on? Who was she holding on for? And then, at this difficult moment, she felt the first movements of the child. Gentle kicks. She had almost forgotten about the pregnancy. So much had piled up. But she wasn't alone. Soon a baby would be born, Leonard's child. Maybe it would look like him? She hoped. From then on, she pulled herself together. She would soon be a mother. She had to be strong for the baby. He was innocent, fragile, vulnerable. He needed someone. She would be that person. She woke up from her sleep and got to work. Little time before childbirth, many problems. Getting the insurance money for the house. It would be enough for maternity leave if she economized. Arranging documents at the clinic. Gathering the baby's layette. All these tasks distracted her from heavy thoughts. She was happy to be alive again. She waited for the baby's arrival, wanted to see the familiar little face, the features of her husband and parents. To feel that she wasn't alone anymore. She worked until late in her pregnancy, scrubbing floors. She carried heavy buckets, bent down. Labor started early. She didn't expect it. Nothing had indicated it. The ambulance was called to work, from there to the maternity hospital. Several hours of agony, and a treasure was placed on her chest, a tiny baby girl. The baby looked strange, wrinkled, purple. She was immediately taken to the ward for premature babies. Val didn't know what was wrong with her. The doctors waved her off. Anything can happen. She wasn't carried to term. What Val went through until the baby's condition stabilized, she had never been so scared. She prayed, just let her survive. Health problems, nothing, they would manage. The main thing was that she lived. She couldn't bear another loss. And Vera survived. She was discharged as a completely healthy child, without diagnoses. Only her low weight was a reminder of her prematurity. Val thought she would fatten her up, but she remained fragile, almost transparent, beautiful, and touching. Vera, as Valerie hoped, looked like her father. Clear-eyed, smiling, charming. At times, Lenny's features were so clearly visible that it seemed like her husband himself was looking at her. This warmed her heart. It was hard being alone with a baby. Until Vera was 2.5 and went to daycare, Val couldn't work. Money was enough for necessities: rent, food, minimal clothing. Sometimes Vera got sick, and they spent money on medicine. Savings dwindled. Benefits were minimal. And yet the young mother felt happy. She had a daughter, a wonderful girl, smart, beautiful, her pride and joy. She felt needed and loved again. They say other people's children grow up fast. Val was convinced her own did too. Time flew. Now Vera was in kindergarten, transformed from a tiny thing into a princess with pigtails. A scene change, a first grader. Val cried at the assembly, feeling sorry for her daughter. Now much was required of her: lessons, homework. What if the teachers were mean? Val had had such teachers. But Vera was radiant with happiness. She couldn't wait to grow up, become independent, and help her mother. She saw how hard it was for Val, how her back and legs ached. A few more years passed like a blur, and now Vera was a high schooler. Her studies weren't great. She tried, Val saw, but it didn't work out. She wasn't upset, didn't shame her. Neither Val nor Leonard had been academically brilliant. The main thing was that Vera grew up kind, sensitive, wise. At home, she knew how to economize, how to cook a delicious dinner on a minimal budget. This was more important than equations. And what a beauty Vera had become. Slender, large-eyed, fair-skinned. Guys turned their heads. Vera didn't notice. Val saw and was proud. If only she would get a good husband. That means a lot for a woman. Vera finished the construction technical school and got a job in a repair crew. Mostly young girls. Nothing difficult, cleaning up after the workers. Val was happy. The work didn't require qualifications, the pay wasn't high, but Vera was busy, and the work wasn't too exhausting. And then Vera fell in love. Valerie understood from her eyes, from her smile. Later, Vera confessed. She had a boyfriend, a wonderful one, Nicholas, and the relationship was serious. She described her chosen one, and Val became thoughtful. He was out of her league, a student at a prestigious university, son of a wealthy mother. Vera wouldn't fit in. Vera was beautiful, hard-working, but the levels were too unequal. But Vera insisted. Everything would be fine. The guy was in love. He talked about marriage. True, he first wanted a place to live, and for that, he needed 3 years abroad. Even then, Val suspected something was wrong. It seemed Nicholas was stringing her along, would play with her and leave, go off to have fun, and forget Vera. And she would wait and suffer. Naive, believing everything, artless. And then Nicholas left. And then it turned out, Vera was expecting a child. What a surprise. Valerie insisted on an abortion. She didn't believe Nicholas would acknowledge the child. And the two women wouldn't manage alone. Most likely the guy had forgotten Vera, and she naively thought he would be happy. Such a foolish child. Valerie shook her head. I told her, leave your fantasies. Nicholas hung on to her every word. But my daughter stood her ground, said you would be happy to know. True, she didn't know how to tell you. Your phone was unavailable. You didn't answer letters. That convinced me even more that you had run away and cut ties. I didn't know who was involved. I only guessed later. Everything finally fell into place just now, talking to you. I wrote to Vera too often, Nicholas choked out. There were problems with communication here, but I wrote every evening, and it was she who didn't answer. No wonder, Val chuckled. Your mother. She apparently intercepted your letters, didn't let you communicate. She really didn't like the future daughter-in-law, a simple girl. How do you know? Nicholas exhaled. I guessed. It's a shame I didn't figure it out sooner. Wait, you'll understand yourself. Listen. Not getting an answer, Vera decided to talk to your mother. Of course, your mother wasn't thrilled. Upon learning about the pregnancy, she became furious. First, she screamed at my girl, accusing her of trying to deceive her, to get money out of her. Then she threatened to take the child because he would be left to the father, who had no money and no home. He would be given to the well-off father, and Vera would lose her rights. She said many hurtful things. Vera stood there half dead with fear. Vera was seriously scared for the child then. She already loved him, was afraid of losing him. What if your mother carried out her threats? Took the baby? Then Vera understood. She had to leave, far away from this terrible woman capable of anything. And Nicholas, he, as she thought, wouldn't support her. According to your mother, you had forgotten about Vera, Valerie continued. She said you had a girlfriend there. You didn't ask about Vera. You shared your happy life. It seemed plausible. And I, based on her words, thought that's how it would turn out. Vera came back after the conversation in tears, sobbing, begging to move, to hide. She regretted her action. She went to your mother for nothing. Nothing good came of it, only trouble. Well, we moved, Valerie sighed. We settled here, in Northwood. Nothing held us in Ashton, no home, no work. So at least in that regard, we were free. Vera wanted to hide, afraid your mother would carry out her threats and take the child. I didn't believe it, but for my daughter's peace of mind, I agreed. And here we are. Mother and daughter quickly settled in. The town was smaller than Ashton. Life was simpler. Prices were lower, the atmosphere calmer. Stephen was born on time, a healthy, sturdy baby. Grandmother and mother doted on the little one. It seemed Stevie understood from infancy how hard it was for his loved ones, and he was an ideal child. He slept, ate, didn't fuss, and was obedient. Money was tight. Valerie and Vera worked as cleaners, earning pennies. It was enough for necessities. Stephen didn't have expensive toys, gadgets, or fashionable clothes, but he didn't complain. On the contrary, he assured them he would grow up and buy everything. We didn't live richly, but happily and peacefully, Valerie continued, tears welling up. And then, tragedy. With Vera, like a bolt from the blue. She got sick, didn't go to the doctor, worked with a fever, scrubbing floors in cold water. She hid it until the last moment. I wouldn't have let her, even though we needed the money. I noticed when she was completely bedridden. I called an ambulance to the hospital. Immediately, bilateral pneumonia advanced. They couldn't save her. So Stephen and I were left alone. Valerie had experienced many losses, but Vera's hit the hardest. If it weren't for Stephen, the elderly woman wouldn't have survived. But she had to be strong for her grandson. She pulled herself together. She worked again, cleaned, cooked. She supported her grandson. It was hard for him too, without a mother at 8 years old. The old woman's speech flowed smoothly. Nicholas was overwhelmed with feelings. His heart ached. Vera was lost forever. He had gotten used to living without her, but he knew she was somewhere. And now now this. But on the other hand, it seemed he had found his son, Stephen, his child, their continuation, their future. But why? Why didn't Vera turn to me even in the hardest times? Nicholas choked out. She knew where to find me. I wasn't hiding. We were afraid, Valerie sighed. Your mother, she made it clear. If we made a claim, she would sue for the child. How were we to know you wouldn't side with her? That's why we hid. How could Vera? How could she think that I… Nicholas didn't finish. Tears were welling up, but he didn't want to cry. Don't judge, Valerie patted his shoulder gently. We were afraid for Stevie, you understand? Fear is a bad advisor. And Vera was offended at first that you found someone else there. And then she often looked at your photos on social media, where you were with different girls. But I didn't have anyone there, Nicholas exclaimed. I worked like Papa Joe to earn money for an apartment quickly, to live with Vera happily. That's fate for you, Valerie shook her head. Fate is quite the trickster. And even now, what was the probability that we would meet here? 0. And yet we're sitting on a bench, talking. I want to see my son, Nicholas suddenly said. Stevie. Yours. He is mine, isn't he? Yours, Valerie smiled. You'll see the boy, and your doubts will disappear. Grandma! Hi! Where did you come from? A hoarse voice was heard. Nicholas turned sharply. A tall, thin teenager. It was as if lightning struck him. He was the spitting image of himself in childhood photos. The teenager looked at him distrustfully. Here comes Stevie, Valerie smiled. Finished work? Yeah, that's why I came. They paid well. Let's go home, you shouldn't be standing here. Stephen didn't seem to understand who Nicholas was. Stop, Valerie hesitated. I want to introduce you to a good man. This is Nicholas, Uncle Nick. I am your father, Nicholas stated directly. The words slipped out. He didn't like Uncle Nick. You… The boy's eyes widened, his eyebrows shot up. The revelation was shocking, but somewhere in his eyes, a flicker of joy and relief appeared. Several years passed. Valerie and Stephen were living in Ashton again. Nicholas bought them an apartment next to his. More precisely, all three lived together, as one family. Nicholas was still not speaking to his mother. After meeting Valerie and Stephen, he returned to Ashton and went to his mother. A long, difficult conversation took place. His mother hadn't expected such a turn. She hadn't known what had happened to Vera, hadn't been interested in the child. She believed she had done the right thing, saved her son from a greedy girl. At first, she denied it, didn't confess to intercepting the letters. That old woman told you stories to palm off her grandson, and you fell for it. The probability that he's yours is minimal. Nicholas could have argued a lot. Stevie was his, there was no doubt. He had the paper, a DNA test. He ordered the test not because he doubted, but for official adoption. Nicholas intended to take Stevie under his wing. The boy had lived in unsuitable conditions for so many years. That would end now. Nicholas begged his mother for a long time to tell the truth. She equivocated, evaded the answer, but from her behavior, he figured it out himself. Then his mother burst out. She called Vera and Valerie names, described the terrible future her son would have had if he'd gotten involved with a pauper. Nicholas looked at his mother, his lips pressed together. His closest person. She had dedicated her whole life to him, helped him make something of himself. And with her own hands, she had destroyed his happiness. Nicholas tried not to think about what would have happened if he had found Vera in Ashton. Stephen would have been 2 years old. They would have gotten married, bought an apartment, lived happily. In a couple of years, Stephen would have had a brother or sister. Vera would have been alive. Nicholas didn't speak to his mother for about 2 years, but he wasn't the one who initiated it. His mother was offended. She was indignant that her son didn't appreciate her contribution. She tried to forbid him, an adult, from communicating with Stephen and Valerie. Upon learning about his paternity, she became furious. "What are you doing? Are you crazy? You're putting your mistress's son around your neck, and the grandmother too. How do you know whose child he is? Who knows what genes he has? You'd be better off marrying a decent woman with a child." She said many unpleasant things about Stephen and Valerie. Nicholas tried to calm her, to explain. It was useless. The elderly woman reacted to her grandson like a bull to a red rag. She lost control, spewing insults. Nicholas felt sorry for his mother, but he wouldn't abandon his child to satisfy her whims, especially since he and his son had immediately bonded. His mother was offended and stopped communicating. Nicholas periodically tried to reconnect. He knew she would soften sooner or later. And for now, there was plenty to do. He needed to catch up with Stephen. Father and son often went on vacation, to the sea, to the mountains. The teenager genuinely admired the world, eagerly soaking up impressions. They talked a lot. Stephen turned out to be an interesting, wise conversationalist. Now that he didn't have to work, his studies improved. At the prestigious gymnasium, he quickly became one of the best. Valerie was always nearby. How could it be otherwise? She had raised Stephen for so many years. They were the closest people. Of course, they couldn't be separated. Nicholas's personal life also improved. He met a woman, interesting and kindred in spirit. She didn't resemble the flighty beauties. Irene worked as an accountant and was raising a son alone, the same age as Stephen. The boys quickly found common ground. Now those were boys! Nicholas smiled, watching the teenagers discussing something or repairing a bicycle. It seemed they would all make a strong, friendly family. Irene immediately became friends with Stephen and Valerie. Peace, harmony, tranquility, mutual support. Nicholas felt warm and at ease. And his mother? His mother would understand in time. She was already unhappy with her stubbornness, Nicholas noticed. Sooner or later she would thaw. That time wasn't far off. No one held a grudge against her. Only mothers perhaps find this hard to understand. Never mind, everything would work out.